Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and welcome back to Joe on Joe, the only podcast where I've covered every episode of the Sunbow cartoon, the DIC. We've even covered the Extreme, and every issue of the Marvel Real American Hero comic book, page by page, panel by panel. I love G.I. Joe. I want you to love him too. So this week, we've got another episode of You on Joe. If you're unfamiliar with You on Joe, that is all about you, the listener, the G.I. Joe fan. You love everything about G.I. Joe, and there's something about G.I. Joe that you want to talk about. Could be an action figure, could be a character, could be a comic book. It could be an entire year's worth of catalogs. Whatever it is that you absolutely love about G.I. Joe, I want to get you on this show. So if you want to participate and be a guest, please reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at JoeOnJoePod, or you can send an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. And you can let me know what topic you want to cover, more specific the better, and we will have an absolute blast. You're going to leave laughing. We always have a good time recording this, and today is absolutely no exception. I loved having today's conversation. Now, while you're online, please, if you would, please give me a rate and review on your podcast app. Every review helps grow the show. Or if you're inclined, you can even visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod. You can help keep the show afloat that way. And also, I want to follow up with you guys and gals have been absolutely fabulous with supporting the Super Joe Unlimited Kickstarter. We got it over the finish line last weekend with a couple days before it ended. So congrats to Austin Huff, and he revealed the Larry Hama cover, and there's just a ton of bonus stuff on there. So, man, do I appreciate all of you listeners for sharing it, spreading the word, contributing yourself if you were so inclined, but just getting the word out and getting more content, more of this good content out there. Much appreciated. So I can't wait to see that book when it's finished. And also something I can't wait to see when it's finished is the thoughts and opinions on movies of my wonderful, wonderful sponsors, Ben and the gang over at Movies in a Meal podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies in a Meal podcast. The Movies in a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews. They do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies in a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Now, it is July, and every July, today's guest has been the leader of a tremendously fun G.I. Joe fandom event. It is called Cobra Convergence. This month marks the 7th year that Bryan Lower, better known as Hooded Cobra Commander 788, has organized an ever-growing list of G.I. Joe creators, myself included, to produce Cobra-specific content, celebrating or in any form highlighting that dastardly organization. Now, Bryan is a longtime G.I. Joe creator. He started his HCC788 channel 9 years ago, and he is one of the more cherished members of this community. His well-produced discussion videos and deep knowledge of the toy line. If you've never seen Bryan's work, you must check out his YouTube channel. It is at HCC788 on YouTube. He is a real force to be reckoned with. I was so honored to have him on the show this week. Now, Bryan brought to the table a wonderful character for our You on Joe discussion, the shirtless wonder Road Pig. This Mad Max cast-off debuted in the 1988 line. He had a great life in the Real American Hero comic book. He shows up in the NES game, and he certainly lived on in our hearts. His Cinderblock sledgehammer makes a deep imprint into your soul, and I had a real good time breaking him down with Hooded Cobra Commander 788 himself. Make sure you check out all of the Cobra Convergence participants. Bryan's website, HCC788.com, has a complete calendar of the daily participants, and be sure to come back here next week as Joe on Joe drops yet another episode of Joe on Joe Theater. Now, I've previously presented Cold Slither Behind the Rock, My Special Missions, and last year's G.I. Columbo. Now, tune in next week to see what's in store for Cobra Convergence 7. So sit back, relax, and take your shirt off to enjoy our discussion of Road Pig. It makes me wonder, have Road Pig and Quick Kick ever fought? Not a sleeve or a cuff to be had in sight.
And I did get my Road Pig figure to have, so I can look at him as we're talking.
Well, how many Road Pig figures do you have, Bryan?
I just have the one. I honestly, for real, just have the one. Not army building Road Pigs. But yeah, I wanted to make sure
you're not a pig for Road Pig. But I'm a big fan of representing everyone's favorite shirtless dreadnought. I really am, Bryan.
The closest competition that he might have would be Xandar, if you can consider him a dreadnought. But that's probably not a close contest.
Yeah, that just depends on if Xandar's own self-esteem that day.
Yeah,
he's just blending into the furniture all the time.
That's it. Yeah, he does. Yeah, in fact, it's not really a contest. Everybody forgets about him. As far as everybody remembers, he's the only shirtless dreadnought.
Exactly. Well, when technically Xandar had the kerchief, right?
Yeah.
So technically not a shirt, but you could see that being the top of a ripped T-shirt, actually.
Yeah, and he has the gun belt, with the strap across his chest, and so he's practically in formal wear.
Yeah,
he could go to a wedding in that.
Right, and that's molded onto him. Meanwhile, whenever I've looked at the Road Pig body without his football gear, accoutrement, like shoulder pad stuff, is disturbingly naked.
Yeah, it's he's but you have to remember, this was the 80s.
Oh yeah,
right. So like
shirtless saxophone players everywhere.
Yeah, for your action star in the 80s, your muscles were your shirt. That was your shirt. Rambo didn't need a shirt to protect him from the environment in the jungle. He needed his muscles and a layer of sweat.
Absolutely.
So,
and a little bit of grease paint for camouflage.
Yeah, so that'll do you. I mean, do you think Schwarzenegger needed a shirt? No, the muscles were the shirt.
In fact, the shirts got in the way in the 1980s.
That's right. Yeah.
It was every event in an action movie was just an opportunity to get less of a shirt on.
It was a great time for the ladies, I gotta say. Congratulations. Sure. That's good for you, ladies.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always dug Road Pig. My first encounter with him was in the G.I. Joe NES game, because I had kind of stopped collecting at the time, and he was like, literally that was the year I kind of stopped getting new Joes. So he wasn't on my radar, but I did play the NES game, and he's a boss on it. Have you ever played that?
I haven't. He's a boss, huh?
Yeah.
I think I was kind of out of it by the time the NES game hit the scene. So that is outside of my experience. Was he a difficult boss?
He was a predictable boss. He wasn't like an end game boss. He was very beatable, actually. But he would march across the screen left and right and slam his giant, it's not what do we call him, the sledgehammer? A cinder block hammer, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, so he would slam his cinder block hammer down, like Mario's hitting a hammer in Donkey Kong. Picture that, right? So that's what he would do. So you would have to jump around him and shoot and fire. If memory serves, he was bigger than you. It's been a while since I've actually played it, but I think he was like on screen maybe twice your size. To give you a little bit more, give your character a little bit more target practice and make him more imposing. But yeah, that was the first time I saw him, and I kind of loved him. I was like, who is this dude? Straight out of Mad Max. I mean, the Dreadnoks all obviously were heavily inspired from Mad Max, but Road Pig literally could have been easily a character in any of the Mad Max movies without any changes, without any tweaks or fixes or enhancements. You could just drop Road Pig into a Road Warrior, Thunderdome, any of them.
Yeah, I mean it's got that style. Obviously the Mad Max, maybe not specifically Mad Max, but that genre inspired the original Dreadnoks. But they kind of ran with it. By the time they were coming out with Road Pig, I mean we got a pirate. That's maybe not quite in that same vein, but here we have. I mean, he's just wild. He's got his flat top. He's got like a red stripe dyed in his hair. He's got an anarchy tattoo. He's a rough and tumble guy for the post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Don't forget the codpiece, Brian.
Oh my goodness, how could we?
Yeah, because he's rocking a major brown codpiece.
It looks like leather with some studs. Yeah, that's
oh, he's making it happen. The flat top is such a nice choice, and the white hair with the red stripe, because like you could have gone bald, you could have gone mohawk with this, but flat top makes him look actually what's the word, like part of the establishment. That's where I'm going. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
It's kind of like this like he's a kid in a 50s prep school going like, I'm going to grow up in the ROTC one day. That's the kind of haircut they gave him, which is totally anachronistic to everything else about him, which I love.
If the flat top was, at least in the comic book, associated with both Hawk and Duke. And that's actually one of the reasons why they could be a little indistinguishable in the comic book, is because they both had that blonde flat top. That's the sharpness of it makes it seem like this is like a regulation haircut for a soldier, for a Duke type. But then he's got that racing stripe. That just in case you think he's too establishment, we throw in a racing stripe.
And do you think he dyes his hair white, or is he like early gray, early white haired kind of a guy?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. But I'm gonna say he's I'm gonna say he's a Steve Martin type. I think this is his hair color.
I agree with you. I do, and I think that's why he's inspired to put the red stripe on, to kind of zhuzh up this early white, stone gray look that nature gave him. I totally agree with you.
I don't know if Steve Martin ever thought of that, but he should think of that.
Now his crossbow, it's like a wrist crossbow, which is the weapon that not Master Blaster, the guy, the guy from Road Warrior, but not Lord Humongous. The guy that rode around with the boy toy.
Let me think.
He had a wrist crossbow just like this. He's the one that he's not the Precious Juice, but he had the mohawk, and actually he's actually the bad guy who went on to become the bad guy in the actor is in Commando. That same actor, yeah. But
no, I was just looking up pictures. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about now.
Yeah. And he had that wrist. I mean, which is great. I think that's what G.I. Joe did really well in a lot of areas, where they would take these other pop culture influences and put them through the lens of G.I. Joe. Now, is that do we know what kind of blocker his right, like, would go on his right arm? Is that like a hockey pad?
I think so. That's my guess. It kind of looks like a hockey goalie padding or something along those lines. That's my best guess anyway.
I think you're,
And he's got a bit of a sports theme already with
yeah,
the shoulder pads, so I could see them going in that direction.
I think you're right. And actually, I don't think his shoulder pads are football pads. I think they're actually meant to be hockey pads. Hockey pads are a little smaller.
It could be.
Yeah, football pads,
Well,
especially at the time,
sorry, go ahead.
they would go lower, and kind of give more robust
Yeah.
protection. Where hockey pads, you still need to be agile and still need to move a little bit, so they're much smaller. So I do think they're actually hockey pads, and then with a hockey glove, like a goalie backstop glove.
That could be. At the very least, they would go together.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm curious about one other thing that I was wanting to check on. See, I did show prep. My show prep was sitting down here and recording the show. Road Pig's birthplace is
Yep.
is Go Blue, Michigan, a hockey state, a state where hockey is quite popular.
You're
So
exactly right. That's exactly what I was going to lead into next. It 100% very popular. And Go Blue, Michigan is actually a fake city that is used. Where did I read it? It's used by. It's from the G.I. Joe fandom page. His hometown of Go Blue, Michigan is actually a non-existent place, but it's created by the Michigan State Highway Commission for their map of 1979 and 1980 because they use fictional names to include in maps as a copyright protection. So
That's
the name
hilarious.
is derived from saying Go Blue, which is the University of Michigan, sports and football / hockey. But yeah, hockey's huge in Michigan.
That is hilarious, and it does kind of fit with Larry Hama's method of picking birthplaces. He wanted to be diverse. He wanted to have people from all parts of the U.S. and other countries as well, because we've got some Australian and British dreadnoks.
Mm-hmm.
But if he picked up a map and just pointed his finger somewhere in Michigan, he may have come up with Go Blue.
Yeah, I wonder if he knew if it was a fake city or if he actually thought it was a real one.
This is a question. Somebody got to ask Larry.
Yeah,
I must know now.
it's a good question to ask. Yeah, because especially at the time, you wouldn't, without the internet to kind of research that stuff, you would look at a map and assume everything on the map is correct, right? I would have,
You would think so.
Like literally,
it certainly wouldn't be obvious unless you had some other source with that information.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be obvious if you picked up a map.
Right. Like today is the day that I learned, July 9th, 2023, that they put fake names on there for copyright purposes. And I've had the internet for well over 20 years.
So yeah, that's really fascinating. So yeah, we can lean toward hockey as the source of the pads, given his birthplace.
Yeah.
The dude is built like a linebacker, though.
He really is. Yeah, everything says football about him, though. It really does.
I mean, we've had muscular, Joe and Cobra figures before, but he is like, his chest is like a barrel. It's huge, not just like sculpted muscles, but with some size.
Mm-hmm.
I feel. I mean, I feel a little dirty talking about an action figure this way, but it's really he's quite nude from the waist up, and they didn't just emphasize the muscles; they emphasized the size.
Yeah, he's bigger. He wasn't used for anyone else until they get to the Street Fighter figures,
Right?
And then he's reused for was it Blanca and Guile?
I think that's right. Yeah.
And Blanca, isn't he the green monster?
Yes.
Yeah. So like that's his body could only be replicated by an otherworldly monster wherever Blanca's from. I don't even know what his deal is. And Guile wasn't he the one with the big tall flat top too? Yeah. But it's different kind of flat top though. That was like a
Right.
inverted pyramid.
Yeah, that one was special. Yeah, this is more of a traditional Duke / Hawk
Yeah.
style flat top.
Now you say you only have one road pig. You never dabbled into road pig V2, the Sonic Fighter version.
Now that I mention it, I do think I have just the figure. I don't have it complete, and now I feel bad because I didn't go and get it so I could look at it side by side. It used the same mold as this one, but recolored.
Yeah, he looks like Tan Mom. If anyone knows who Tan Mom is.
Yeah. Let me.
He's just been in the tanning booth way too long. He's
Yeah,
orange. He's literally orange.
Yeah, we may have some artificial tanner on this guy. He's vain now.
Yeah, and it leaked onto his hair because now his hair's orange too.
So he for fans of the comic book series, Road Pig had a split personality. Donald being the other personality. Donald is incredibly vain. He wants to be tan. He wants to be beautiful. He's more into the bright colors and the fashion. So I think that this is going to be my headcanon. Version 2 is Donald.
Donald asserting himself.
That's right. Yeah, he's taken over for a little bit.
And Donald, of course, his real name is Don DeLuca, but that's named after the Hasbro designer Don DeLuca.
That's right. Yeah. And that's not something they do anymore. In fact, there's like a moratorium on basing figures on real people now, but that was much more common practice. Sometimes the names got snuck in without the real person being aware of it. I think, who was it? It was Fast Draw. I forget that person's name, but that the actual person wasn't at first aware that he was his name was used for a G.I. Joe. But Don DeLuca, I'm sure, would have.
Elliot Brown wasn't aware of this?
Yeah. I emailed him a few years ago when I was researching Fast Draw, and he seemed surprised that his name was actually used for the figure. Kind of, it was mentioned something about Larry being really cheeky.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, because Elliot Brown was an artist for Marvel.
That's right. Yeah, that's how Larry would have known. And let's see, Steve Lealoha, his name got used for Torpedo, I believe.
Yep.
So yeah, it did happen, but this is a situation where I'm pretty sure this would have come from Hasbro.
Right.
So
well, it's funny you mentioned that. A few weeks ago, I was hanging. We were at an event, and it was like a fundraiser theater event thing, and the actress Amy Yazbek was there, and she was lovely, and we were talking about all kinds of stuff. My wife was there representing her teachers union, and podcasting came up or something like that. And so I mentioned a G.I. Joe podcast. She said, "Oh my God, she grew up with a bunch of the designers of G.I. Joe."
No kidding.
Yeah, in I think either in Cleveland or in Ohio. It definitely was in Ohio, and so she was laughing about it. So I gave her my card, and she said she had already pinged them. It's been a few weeks. I don't know if they're out there, but if they're listening, please give me a holler. We'd love
please.
We'd love to have you on the show.
No, those folks we love to hear from.
Yeah,
it's amazing the kind of insider information and personal stories you get, and that's awesome.
It was completely random, and she couldn't have been lovelier. We all went to dinner and hung out after the show and everything. There was a big crew of us, and she couldn't have been nicer. But it was hilarious that randomly she grew up with and still is in touch with dudes that were on the G.I. Joe team. Like, more,
that's awesome.
And because she was saying that they named themselves after him. That she was talking specifically about how the Joe names were named after real people. That's where it connects to this. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and here's a perfect example. Absolutely.
The cartoon, he showed up in DIC season 2. And this is interesting that I realized never realized until looking at the trivia page on the fandom. I guess I never put it together when we covered all that DIC stuff. Is They never actually they said the word Dreadnoks like once in the DIC show, and he was never mentioned as a Dreadnok on the show. The Dreadnoks are basically forgotten about on the DIC or written out per se, but he just wasn't. He wasn't identified. He was just a big bruiser that hung out with, and protected Zorana. No, I really like him as a bodyguard / puppy love thing going on that he has with Zorana. I think that works so well. I think just that type of relationship is one that just is, there's a lot of room for comedy and a lot of room for character moments in the comic book or in the cartoon, all that stuff.
I think that's what the Dreadnoks are good for. I mean, you can have some lighter moments. I mean, these guys are nuts, right? They're all a little crazy. So you can have those lighter moments. You can have these, funny relationship quirks. I think that's one of the great things that they added to G.I. Joe media in both the comic book and the animated series. The Dreadnoks were kind of out of fashion by the time that second series took off. But I mean, the file card for version 2 still mentions that he's a Dreadnok. The last original Dreadnok, I believe, would have been Naugahyde.
Yep.
So yeah, Dreadnoks were kind of out of fashion. If you were coming into G.I. Joe and you were brand new by 1991, you might not have any idea what a Dreadnok is. I mean, what's that supposed to be?
Yeah, they were kind of phased out, which is disappointing.
It is, and it's a little surprising because they had it going for a while. That's a theme that you can run with, that you can kind of exploit, but they kind of just let it peter out.
Yeah. They're the Cobra equivalent of Polly, and Spirit talking to Freedom. That they're that wild card silly element of the show for the Cobra side. They bring all this character to it, and they bring this level of, those people couldn't exist in real life. Whether it was in the comic book or on the cartoon, like. They're just they would never fit in any polite society. It's completely out of any kind of reality. But then that helps make us enjoy the reality that the Joes are in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it sets a tone. It also gives you a bit of a relief from, more serious subject matter that they could be covering in an episode or a comic book issue. Because sometimes it could be fairly serious, or at least the characters took it seriously. I mean, sometimes the premise was also a little wacky, but at least the characters were taking it seriously. But having this kind of outlet to give you a way to ease some of that heavier tone, to give you a little bit of a lighter tone, I think enhances the story, and it sharpens the contrast with those more serious moments. So I just think it needs something like this, and I'm glad that we got it. And I would love to see the Dreadnoks interpreted in live action, at least more than they have been.
Absolutely.
We've gotten some iterations of G.I. Joe, but the Dreadnoks have been neglected.
Yeah, they really have, and I think it's to those movies' detriments, because you really could bring a lot of flavor to the Cobra side instead of just also because your main Cobras, as Hooded Cobra Commander, and Destro, even to a point, even though his mask moves, they're concealed faces, right?
Yeah.
Dreadnoks are all wide open. They're all they're absolutely facially expressive.
They are all out there. They hold nothing back.
Yep.
And it's a nice it's a nice contrast. I think one of the reasons that they've had such a hard time getting us some Dreadnoks is that the live action movies they get started. We may get a sequel. It gets rebooted, or it gets a soft reboot. And I think for the filmmakers, the priority is to, get your G.I. Joe and get your Cobra in there, get your Snake Eyes in there. and the Dreadnoks are just a little too far down the priority list. But these guys were an important part of the lore back in the 80s, and at least for Dreadnought in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it really enhanced the story. You can take G.I. Joe really seriously if you want to, but even movies that are very serious, even movies that that really are kind of intended for more adult audiences and tackle some very serious subject matter, a lot of them will still add a bit of I don't know, a bit of a lightness, a bit of a change of tone, because audiences struggle to keep up with a relentlessly dour tone.
Correct.
For the length of an entire movie or a book or whatever. So I really think that in the future, hopefully they will consider, using the Dreadnoks as they were used, back in the day.
Imagine
to give us a little bit more of a rounded universe for G.I. Joe.
Imagine a Sons of Anarchy style show around the Dreadnoks. Just wrap your head around that. How great would that be?
That would be wild. That would be wild. That's some G.I. Joe fans have mentioned that they'd really, rather than a movie, they'd really like to have a TV series, like on a streaming service or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something you could do with a series, rather than a movie, is that you could expand on that a bit, and you could delve into something like the Dreadnoks, where you have a lot, like a mix of personalities, a mix of relationships, and you could do that way better than you could shoehorning them into a movie. I think that would be so fun.
Here's the premise. You take what they did with the comic book Cobra, and you have Chuckles infiltrating the Dreadnoks. That's your show.
Wow. Yes,
that's your show.
Does he still have the Hawaiian shirt? Is that wild enough?
100%. He starts with the Hawaiian shirt, and then that eventually gets incorporated into his Dreadnought look. Like, kind of, we were talking about, like Xandar has the ripped shirt kind of on top. He has some kind of Hawaiian motif bandana on or something like that.
That's it.
But he's the undercover Joe that has to infiltrate the Dreadnoks and blah blah blah, prove the whatever, and it takes place in the swamps of Jersey, at a gas station. That's their clubhouse, and it's just Sons of Anarchy set through the Dreadnoks.
Yeah, Hasbro, please send your checks to Joe on Joe podcast. These ideas are not free.
No,
that's
they're not
a great idea, and you should be compensated.
They're not free, but I'll tell you, I want credit, and I just want to see it made. That's all. Don't even send me money. Just send me credit and maybe a ticket to an opening. Because
fair enough. I would watch that.
That would be such a great show.
G.I. Joe is so expansive that I really think you can look at it beyond the genre of, whatever you think it is, like Cold War, military, futuristic, whatever. You also have you got some sci-fi. You've got your Dreadnoks with with your biker gang stuff. You've got ninjas. You've got all this martial arts stuff. You've got espionage. You can pull out those elements of G.I. Joe and expand on those, and you could have something. Not everything has to be Snake Eyes, Duke, and Cobra Commander. There's more there.
Right. Not every movie has to be Mass Device.
Yeah.
There were a lot of schemes and plots and small things that you saw Cobra do, all the time, that you were like, man, yeah, they're really busy. They really got a lot going on. And then you'd get a 5-parter where they'd, build a pyramid of darkness. You're like, oh, okay, that's a global threat. But previously, it was just, they were just trying to, bring down some banking institution or something like that. So yeah, you could absolutely do a smaller scale version in one of those genres. So I look forward to it. Dreadnoks on FX coming in fall of 2025.
Associate producer Joe.
Co-executive producer Bryan, Hooded Cobra Commander 788. Now, Bryan, we're talking Road Pig, and I do love Road Pig. I think he's great, but we're also talking about Cobra Convergence, which is your baby. We're in the midst of it right now. Tell the listeners, if they're unfamiliar with Cobra Convergence, what is Cobra Convergence?
All right. And I will give credit to two other people for helping me get this started, and who were just as integral. Form BX257, whose real name is Kevin, and Timmer from the show Half the Battle. The three of us started Cobra Convergence back in 2016, when we did a collaboration, and we kind of all did everything on one day in July. But since then, each year we have expanded it. We have brought in more creators, and the whole idea is that these G.I. Joe fans who are creating things about G.I. Joe on the internet in various places, on YouTube, Instagram, podcasts, blogs, all of these places, all these creative people, we get together. And during the month of July, everyone creates something related to Cobra. It's a Cobra-focused event. Cobra being a narrow enough topic that we can all, kind of get on board with the same topic, but also broad enough that, people can look at all kinds of different angles on Cobra. There's a lot to it. So we all do something Cobra. There's a calendar. So every day in July, there's at least one and sometimes two presenters on every single day. The website is HCC788.com. And if you go there, right on the front page, there's a calendar of presenters and when they will be coming up on each day. So that's basically what it is. We get together, we collaborate, we have fun, we talk about Cobra. We spotlight each person as they make their own presentation, and it's a great way for all of us to work together and do something that hopefully is enjoyable to everyone. Each person who is involved in Cobra Convergence, they do their content on their own forum. So if on their YouTube channel or their podcast, they do it there. For their audience, but we also, share all of that with everyone else, so that people who may not be familiar with that creator will go and check it out. And a lot of people have found creators that they didn't know existed, but now they found something they really enjoy through going through that calendar on Cobra Convergence. In addition to that, I would like for Cobra Convergence to be something that everyone in the G.I. Joe fan community participates in. So on that page on HCC788.com, there is also a link if you would like to do your own Cobra Convergence creation or presentation. There's a way that that can be shared as well. So please, if there's anything that you do that is creative and you would like to be involved in Cobra Convergence, it's going on right now. It's going to be going on all through July. Please join. This is meant to be inclusive. This is meant to include as many people as possible. So that's what Cobra Convergence is. That is what we are doing right now. And we are going to have some really cool stuff between now and the end of July.
That's fantastic, Bryan. Rising tides lift all ships. That's what I love about Cobra Convergence. Exactly what you said, where it gets you aware of all these other creators. We all get to talking, on the boards and sharing with each other. And it's so supportive, and it's so, it's a unifying activity once a year that I look forward to, that you and Kevin and Timmer have spearheaded, and it's growing. And every year there's more and more people. So now there's more than 31 people. So now it's got to be Cobra Convergence. Hot Cobra Convergence summer is what it needs to be.
Yes, the hot Cobra Cobra Convergence Summer, and I'm glad that you're in it. I always look forward to what you do, and those folks that are on the calendar, they are the ones who are doing the creative work. There is a lot of creativity and passion in this community. I really think that we have a pretty good fan community for GI Joe. And there's a lot of creative folks out there. So many that, you may not be familiar with all of them.
Yep.
There may be somebody out there creating something that you think is just awesome, but you wouldn't know about them. Well, this is an opportunity to explore some folks that maybe you don't know about. And maybe latch onto something that you will really enjoy. So,
awesome.
Yeah, please, obviously check out Joe on Joe.
Well, thank you.
Your Cobra Convergence presentations have been unique and enjoyable, and also check out everybody else.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, mine are a bit more theatrical, and I really love doing it, and I love doing. I've decided to last couple times to really base those around Cobra Convergence, so it gives me a yearly target to hit.
I love it, and I think all of them I've listened to more than once. It's worth more than one go through, more than one listen.
Oh, that means a lot. Thank you very much. And on Twitter and all the social stuff, it's hashtag Cobra Convergence or hashtag Cobra Convergence 7, or what's the right hashtag for us to look for?
I've been mostly using hashtag CC7 because life is short, so the fewer characters I can type, the better.
I agree.
But also, hashtag Cobra Convergence 7. But I do try to make sure to put hashtag CC7 on everything that I put up anyway.
Yeah, and listeners, if you don't already follow Bryan as Hooded Cobra Commander 788, he's got a great channel. You've been in this G.I. Joe fan content game for 10 years.
Yeah. I just celebrated the 9th anniversary of the channel back in April, so we're coming up on 10 years. And I'm not the oldest or the longest running by any means. I mean, What's on Joe Mine has been running for years, and Timmer on Half the Battle has had a show for longer than I have. Kevin, Form BX257, he's, at least on YouTube, he's kind of like the grandfather of GI Joe in the YouTube space, and he had been doing it for several years before even I or Timmer started.
Do me a favor. Say Kevin's screen name again, because every time you've said it, I've been having trouble understanding it. What is it?
Oh yeah, Form BX257.
Form BX257, and that's his YouTube handle.
Yes, it's a rather deep cut. It's a reference to an animated series episode. I think actually the first episode of the Mass Device. There's a mention of a Form BX257. That's where he got his name.
I love that. That's amazing. That is so up my alley.
Yeah. So yeah, for those of us who know who he is, if you go back and watch the Mass Device, your ears will perk up when you suddenly hear Form BX257. Oh, that's where it comes from.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really great. So, has yours dropped yet? Your specific contribution?
Yeah, I did Saw Viper last Sunday. And
what a villain of the age for the ages.
The most villainous, the most villainous. Deadly of villains.
Yes, most villainous.
For me, Cobra Convergence is all month though, so I will have all of the videos that I put out on every Sunday this month will be Cobra Convergence related. But my specific day on the calendar was the first Sunday of the month, and yeah, I did the Saw Viper. I thought this would be a good time to talk about the deadliest Cobra trooper.
True that. I think that's also one of the biggest, not to get negative, but missed opportunities. He could have been developed into an absolute legendary revenge-driven villain, right?
Yeah, that they ended up killing him off, or at least it was implied
Right.
that he was killed off. And we did see other Saw Vipers later in the series, but that specific one,
Yeah.
I mean, he did something that no other single Cobra up to that point had done,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really significant. And that's more could have come from that.
Yeah, he really. That's one of the few moments where I'm like, oh, what could have been. You give him a modified, and I'm talking like in the comics, maybe not in the, different versions of the toy, but who knows? Uh, give him a modified version of it, of the Saw Viper outfit, right? So he distinguishes himself. Maybe less of a mask or the scarred, because I think one of those drawings he had like a broken mask, and you see his
Right.
eyes or something like that. You do some version of that to set him apart from the other Saw Vipers. Give him a like a marking to denote the number of Joes that he killed, like a check mark kind of a thing. Put it on his shirt.
That would be so cool. I
Yeah.
would have purchased 100 of them.
Oh man, every time he
But that
showed
wouldn't
up.
make sense to purchase 100 of them because he's just one guy. I would have purchased one of them.
Yeah, every time he showed up, it would have just been personal, emotional energy all the time with those characters. Someone would have had a vendetta against. It would have been, yeah, and culminating in a big 6-issue hunt the Saw Viper. Oh my god, it would have been so great. That was one of those moments when I was like, man, it was like they poochied him off screen.
The Zartan had an arc kind of like that with the slow reveal of well, I hate to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read the 40-year-old comic book, but the slow reveal that he was the assassin of the Hardmaster. He
Right.
had that kind of, so it's not unheard of to do that kind of arc. Um, through the golden age of both the comic book and the animated series, there have been a few standout troopers. In the toys, they were just generic troopers. You're meant to army build them, but we've had a few individuals come out of those ranks, and I, at least as a kid, I wanted those as toys. I've told this story before, but back in, I guess it would have been '83, in the comic book series, we had Scarface.
Mm-hmm.
He was a special Cobra officer with scars, and he was part of this storyline in the comic book. Because he was in the comic book, I thought we were going to get a toy.
Yeah.
So I thought that maybe one of these Cobra officers that were on the pegs at the retail stores would be Scarface. So I was staring at these Cobra officer figures to see if I could spot a scar on any of them.
That and they wouldn't have had to do another mold. You would have just done a pink paint application right across the bridge of his nose.
Yeah.
Got a whole new figure.
At least not until the modern era did we get a Scarface figure. But in your 7 or 8-year-old brain, you're not thinking about like the cost of producing figures and factories and all of this business. As far as your 7 or 8-year-old brain is concerned, action figures come from the store,
right?
And you take them out of the package and you play with them. That's the extent of it. But yeah, no, I wanted a Scarface, and I would have wanted I would have wanted that Saw Viper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Well, Bryan, we're here to celebrate Road Pig, and we're here to celebrate Cobra Convergence. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I always look forward to what you do. I'm really excited, and it's just very kind of you to have me on.
Oh man, it's such my pleasure. You are such a positive force online with this stuff. Just a good heart, and you're always great. You're just great online presence. So I really appreciate you, and I think we all the listeners, if you're not already aware of Hooded Cobra Commander, you are now, and you bring your A game all the time. Do you have any plans to complete your Road Pig collection and get the more modern versions?
Well, I'm definitely gonna get like the Sonic Fighters Road Pig. I'm trying to complete the entire vintage run, so I definitely will do that. As far as post vintage Road Pigs, if they give us a classified Road Pig, I'm all over that.
No, that would be amazing. They announced the first 3 Dreadnoks, right? Torch, Rip, and Buzzer.
But it is on the way, though.
It is on the way. Yeah.
We're supposed to be getting them, and if we're gonna get some Dreadnoks, some proper Dreadnoks, because I mean we've got Zarana, we got Zartan, but if we're gonna get some proper Dreadnoks, I think Road Pig is one that could be translated to that scale really well.
Oh, he would be great. Absolutely, would be fantastic. I really do. Yeah. So you heard that, Hasbro. We solved your movie problem by turning it into a Dreadnoks TV show. And now we're solving your classified problem. You need to do a Road Pig classified. Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Hopefully our checks are in the mail.
Awesome. Bryan, thanks again for being on the show. And
thank you so much.
Now you, Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.